Notice is hereby given that a meeting of the City Council Committee on Government Services, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, will be held on Wednesday, November 16th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. For the purpose of this meeting is to meet with the city engineer to discuss trash pickup, street sweeping, and the issue of litter on city streets. This meeting will be held in person at City Council Chambers, 93 Washington Street, second floor, and via remote participation in accordance with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022. In-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, and public may also participate, listen, and/or view this meeting while in progress via the remote participation platform Zoom through any one of the following ways. Please click the link below to join the webinar, password 959380, by telephone. Subcommittee meetings are held to take action for the purpose of making recommendations to the full council. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time by technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so on matters not requiring a public hearing, we will post on the City of Salem's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Persons requiring auxiliary aids and services for effective communication, such as sign language interpreter or an assistive listening device, or print materials in digital format, or reasonable modification in program services, policies, or activities, may contact the City of Salem ADA coordinator as soon as possible and no less than 2 business days before the meeting, program, or event. Agenda, meeting with the city engineer to discuss trash pickup, street sweeping, and the issue of litter on city streets. Joining us from the committee are Councilors Watson-Felt. All members of the committee are present, along with Councilor Prosnewski from the Committee of the Whole. We also have Dave Knowlton with us, the city engineer. So we initially thought about holding this meeting in October, and I reached out to Dave, and Dave said, could we please do this in November? And I think that was a reasonable request, but I think that the genesis, I guess, of this is that this is a topic that is, it's the most basic thing that we do as a city. It's probably the first thing I was reached out to, I think, as a counselor on, is just questions around trash pickup. Basic questions about when it happens and why it happens and frequency, but also questions around equity that come up around this and often do around these very basic city services. So Councilor Merkel and I had a conversation around this, and we decided to bring it forward and just have a conversation in a public meeting and allow the public to give testimony if they choose, and allow councilors to ask any questions. So Dave, actually, if you want to start out, just sort of talk through, you and I talked a little bit this morning just about just some things that are happening with trash pickup and even the subject of equity. But if you want to sort of talk through some of those basic things that we're working through right now, and then if we have any questions, we'll go to about 7 o'clock with councilor questions, and then if anyone has public testimony, 7 o'clock we'll take public testimony, and then whatever's left over between that and 7:30, we will allow councilors to ask more questions if they have them.
I don't know. Do you want me to stand or sit? You like it this way? Oh, does this go down?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Can we move that mic? There you go.
It's a slow. You know, I can stand too.
No, sit.
Is that all right? Okay.
If you do stand, that raises
Yeah.
for your height. You're not
First time I've been solid.
Just, I don't Yeah, it's as low as it can go.
I think it's.
There you go.
Yeah. Just want to make sure everybody can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. Volume good? Perfect. All right, great. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you. Yeah, Ty did send me a couple of points that he wanted to make sure that we talked about tonight, and we did have a conversation about it as well. So I broke it down into 4 categories. One was trash pickup in the point, private dumpsters, fees to landlords versus residents, and then finally the sweeping schedule. And so I've got some information I can share on that, and certainly ready to answer any questions that you may have. There are some things that are not necessarily all in engineering. There's some collaboration that we do with the Board of Health related to private dumpsters and things like that and enforcement, but we work together well, but there's always improvements that we can make for sure. To start with trash pickup in the point, we have, just so you know, we have about 240 public trash barrels throughout the city. And that's, in parks, downtown, all over the place. In the B5 district, just for kind of reference, we have about 52 barrels. And that's on the normal days, normal season. Obviously on Halloween, those numbers go way up. We use cardboard barrels and extra barrels throughout the downtown to keep up with the trash and the folks that come through the city, the visitors. And finally, in the point, we have currently 19 barrels. So out of the 240, 52 barrels represents about 22% of the barrels in the city that are in the B5 district, and just under 10% in the Point area. In-season barrels in the Point area, we empty twice a day, and in-season would be, as soon as the end of the winter time, we get into spring and summer, and then right through to the fall. We empty barrels twice a day, all the public barrels in the Point, Monday through Wednesday. We add another pickup on Thursday and Friday, and then on Saturday and Sunday, we go up to 4 times. So there's a lot of effort that we put into emptying the public barrels. Litter is also picked up when we're there to empty the barrels. Picking means we have pickers that go around, and guys have barrels. A lot of the same type of thing you see during haunted happenings. And that's typically one hour a day is spent in the area. We focus on Mary Jane, the splash pad park that's there, Lafayette Park, and then we do go to Palmer Cove typically once a week, and we spend about a couple of hours there. Basically, after they have events in the park, whether it's basketball games or softball games, things like that, we want to try and keep that up. So we spend some time in there. Overall, we do see a lot of illegal dumping, which would mean household trash going in the public barrels, and that only confounds the problem with litter because those household trash bags end up taking up the volume of the public barrels, and there's not enough for people to put. Not enough space for people to put things in, so that's a challenge. And then I'll talk about sweeping a little bit, but I think it's important to say now is the compliance with the no parking when we do sweeping is really important. If we can get the cars out of the way, it makes a much more efficient sweeping exercise when we blow the sidewalks, the material into the street, and then we sweep up the material that's there. We did have a meeting back in 2020 with the Point Neighborhood Association to talk about litter. Then the mandatory recycling coordinator, Michaela Gulemi, was there. She played a big role in that. We talked about litter resulting from overflowing open covers from toters and also the private dumpsters certainly is an issue. A lot of careless behavior. People just kind of throw things wherever they want to throw them, which is, it's unfortunate. And litter can also, can always be present in the neighborhood. And I think it's kind of a mindset. If you see a lot of litter on the street, you don't think about, well, what should I do with this thing in my hand, this wrapper? I'll just throw it. So it's kind of an issue that it's the thought process that the people in the neighborhood or the visitors to the neighborhood get.
Hey, David, I'm sorry. I'm getting a complaint from a constituent on Zoom. Are you able to get the mic right to your thing?
Sure. Is that better? Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I got it. Okay. I'll do it. Yeah. There we go. Okay. The Point is obviously a densely populated area, and litter compliance and using, appropriately sizing the dumpsters and making sure the covers are closed on the private dumpsters is a challenge. It's an enforcement issue, and that's where the Board of Health comes in. We kind of work together with them. When our waste reduction coordinator goes out and does inspections early in the morning, she makes notes, and I think now it's Janelle Rolk is in that position. She just started a couple months ago, so she's getting her feet wet and really starting to get out into the neighborhoods and understanding that. But again, it's kind of difficult to enforce. If people don't see the consequences from littering, then they think, well, somebody else is going to pick it up. So it's kind of a mindset that I think we need to change there. We did try a pilot back in 2020 of picking up trash twice a week in the Point neighborhood. It was a pilot for about a month's time, and it was done a pickup on Tuesday and on Friday from August to September 14th, and we only saw about half of the residents or the buildings in that neighborhood put bins out twice each week. A lot of times we just saw the same one bin, or the bins out on a single day. So a lot of people didn't take advantage of it. We did see a slight uptick in the amount of trash that we did pick up during that pilot, but we didn't see the reduction in litter that we were hoping to see. So we did it for about a month, and we just said, it's not going to work. We got to shift gears. And I think the focus on the private dumpsters and enforcement and kind of public relations, public communications to the neighborhood is probably the way to go. And out of that meeting, the next steps was, a more collaborative effort with our waste reduction coordinator and the Board of Health on enforcement, inspect private dumpsters, contact the property owners, potentially more public bins, but that's a challenge too because there's not a lot of space to put public trash barrels out there on the streets. The corners are narrow and things like that. We kind of have saturated the areas that we think we can put them in and where they're most useful. And then there's the issue of the illegal dumping that's out there. And then the thought was to start an anti-litter campaign, which we really haven't done. We were kind of in the middle of COVID. It's something that I think we can think about and kind of resurrect and get that going, working with the ward council, working with the neighborhood association, and maybe the North Shore CDC to get the word out and try and change the way people think about the neighborhood and trash that's out there. So that was really what I can share with you now, and I can take questions on this, and I can go on to the other issues if you'd like.
Sure. Actually, before we get on to questions, just had just one that may be an easier one or a quicker one to sort of get through right now is the question, because the point we can talk about and we will talk about for sure. There's a lot of issues there and a lot of things that we want to discuss there. But just trash pickup in general. One of the questions that we've taken pretty frequently has been about fees for trash pickup. So just for those listening at home, the question frequently is homeowners don't pay a fee for trash pickup, landlords do. Those fees inevitably, even if it's only a few dollars, those fees are passed on to the rents. So there's an issue of equity that we wonder about and wonder why that even exists in there. So you and I talked about that a little bit today, if you wanted to sort of just talk through that.
Yeah, that was something that was implemented 20 plus years ago. I've been working for the city 15 years, and it was in place at least I think 5 years before. And it is really, it's a bit of a odd setup where a fee is charged to any non-owner occupied multifamily home. So if you have a multifamily home and you live there, you don't get charged a fee. But if you're not there, so it causes issues with the city as far as issuing the trash fee. Someone has to come in and provide documentation that they own the house and they live in the house. And it changes from time to time. People, the owner may live there for a while and then not live there, and then they get charged a fee and they don't. But it's something that was a decision that was made 20 plus years ago. It may be something that the council, the body, the new administration coming up may want to consider to make it fair. The fees that we collect now, we do have a solid waste enterprise account, but the fees that we charge, it's not a fully functional operation enterprise account like the water and sewer is. All the money we bring in from water and sewer billing is used for the water and sewer maintenance and improvements to the system. And it doesn't get subsidized by anything else, so we have to raise the rates to adjust all that stuff. Solid waste on the other side really only has a portion of it that's subsidized. The rest is subsidized by the rest of the residents and businesses in the city. So I think it is something that, if you choose to pursue and the new administration comes in and looks at that, I think it's worthwhile, kind of studying it, do a thoughtful way of trying to, roll that out and understand what that would mean to everybody in the city.
So your recommendation there, if we wanted to change that, would be to essentially lower the fee and spread it out across the entire city, that everyone would pay a smaller fee, and that it would be equitable across
potentially
homeowners, renters. Yeah.
True, and I think the decision has to be made. Is it going to be a fully functional enterprise account, or is it something you still want to subsidize? So a lot of the decisions there, a lot of different departments in the city are involved. Certainly the administration, to be part of that.
I think you may need to speak up just a little bit. I'm just
sorry.
Seeing. Okay, Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hepworth. Yeah, I'd like to talk more about the point, not only because some of the point, like Lafayette Park and Lafayette Street on the west side is in my ward, and part of going down Palmer Cove is in my ward, so Levitt Street, Chase Street. So just a suggestion, when I was doing the recycling, the one route that I could actually walk before the recycling truck from Waste Management or Northside Carting, even before that, was the point. You can literally walk the point in about maybe an hour and a half. And so I'm not saying every week, because that's what I did, but perhaps having a presence in the point where you have, like, if you remember, we had door hangers in English and Spanish. Maybe if there was something that Janelle or someone could do where, you know, on recycling day, just walk up and down the streets. It's amazing how many people are out there. You see people bringing them out. You can talk to people. You can kind of get feedback. And that may be a way to, you know, get people to not only recycle properly, but maybe address some of the litter issues. So that's just a thought. Regarding, you know, increasing the barrels, I was talking to Councilor Varela about this. I do feel that the more barrels we put in place, the more likely people are going to put stuff in the barrels that don't belong in the barrels. You know, people will put recycling in there. They'll just, right now, we have an issue, as you mentioned, where the barrels overflow, and then it makes it difficult for the DPS guys to you know, to manage that. So even though I feel like having more barrels can address some of the problem, I don't think by itself it's you know, in the universal world, the right way to, I mean, you're not going to necessarily get rid of litter just because you have more barrels. The same people who are throwing litter on the ground are going to throw litter on the ground. They're not going to, like, it's like people who don't use the crosswalk and cross, you know, 20 feet before it. If you're going to throw something on the ground, you're not going to say, oh, there's a bin there. So just an idea that this is maybe more outreach than it is having a facility to accept it. I'm not saying we shouldn't have more barrels, but we shouldn't look at it that as going to fix the problem.
I agree. It's a behavioral issue that we have to address, which can be a challenge, but I think you're right.
Do you think that the majority of, in your opinion, I don't know if I'm sure we haven't done a study on this, but do you think that the majority of the litter that we see in neighborhoods, is that coming from littering, or is that coming from commercial dumpsters that are getting, I guess it seems to me just anecdotally, as I run through different neighborhoods, I see overflowing dumpsters that are getting either not secured or left open, and then the trash ends up blowing all over the neighborhood. Or is it people, I guess I rarely see people, I'm sure it happens, but less often see people just throwing their trash on the ground. I don't know how much trash that could cause in a neighborhood beyond a seagull picking through a dumpster. I don't know if we've studied that or if we have any evidence of what causes it. I guess my question just is around like a public awareness campaign. Is there a use to that? And almost, I guess to my ear, I hear that as sort of blaming the people who live there. I know that's not the intention, but blaming the people who live there rather than fixing a systemic issue, which seems to be the commercial dumpsters.
Yeah, and it can be commercial dumpsters. It can be just the toters. If the lids aren't closed, you know, if those are overflowing, they're left out there. They're open to animals, seagulls, whatever, and the wind blowing them around. It's hard to say, is there a percentage you could tie to each? But I think it's a combination of all of those three things, you know, the private dumpsters, the toters that are out there, and then, you know, just human behavior.
Councilor McLean?
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. Through you to Mr. Knowlton. Just a quick clarifying question about Palmer Cove. You mentioned that the public barrels in the B5 are picked up 2 to 4 times a week, depending on the day of the week, and that Palmer Cove gets sort of an hours-long, deeper cleaning once a week. Excuse me. I just wanted to clarify whether that means the barrels that are cited in Palmer Cove are also only being emptied once a week, or whether those are on the same 2 to 4 a day schedule, because if it's just once a week, that seems like a pretty clear explanation for why they're constantly overflowing.
Yeah, no, the frequency that I was talking about was talking about the barrels in the point that we pick up, and then there's also a litter effort, you know, to go and actually pick litter that's flowing around, blowing around in the wind. That's the Palmer Cove effort, the 2 hours a week that we go and we spend picking up litter in that area, and plus, you know, Mary Jane and the Lafayette Park, those areas.
So barrels that are sited within the confines of the park would still be getting emptied on that regular multi-day schedule.
And it's, you know, it's a couple times a day during the week, and it gets more frequent Thursdays and Fridays, and then we have a bigger effort on the weekends because we know people are out enjoying the parks and the whole Point area.
Sure, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Hapler. Through you to Mr. Knowlton, I have two questions for you. Well, one, a statement. And I know this is where Councilor Cohen and I somewhat disagree. I did kind of a social experiment over the last 6 months in Beverly, where we had our business right outside, right on Rantoul and Federal Street, which is a fairly busy location. It was constantly littered with trash from the moment we moved in. What I started doing was actually just left my trash bin after trash pickup out on the sidewalk, and it seemed to help with the problem. So, I understand that, adding more trash cans might be an inconvenience and might not be feasible just with what you guys do with your schedule. But is there an opportunity there to at least experiment, especially with sites that you see more just trash everywhere on the street? If you make it more convenient for the residents or the people that live there, will they possibly just be like, well, instead of putting it in the street, I have a bin here? My second question was about, the capital fund trying to lower the cost for residents concerning trash. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe per ton for solid waste, we're around $73 to $75 per ton. That was probably back in like March, April.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit higher than that, but
Okay.
you're in that
So
range.
I guess my concern is, I know we have a really good rate with waste management. I know for recycling, I'm assuming that's the contract with the solid waste as well.
Yes.
I know in a couple of years that's going to change and there's going to be a significant increase. Do you see a concern there as far as just a budgetary concern, as far as not being able to, at this point, now it's going to cost us 30 to 40% more in solid waste, is that I'm assuming is going to take away from the budget when it comes to picking up trash?
It very well could. There's inflation, there's supply chain issues that are affecting everything at this point in time. We have been locked into, we're coming to the end of a 15-year commitment with waste management, so we have been kind of locked in, and they have, contractual escalation clauses in their contract for every year, and that's what you see with the budget. But we, go out to bid, again, it's kind of wide open. We'll just have to see what the market provides. It could very well be, if the economic continuation situation continues, it may be that we're looking at higher costs for sure.
Awesome. And then I guess, is there an opportunity there just to experiment, let's say in a neighborhood like the Point, and just put out a couple more trash cans or significantly much more to see if it does actually create an environment where you might see less trash actually in the sidewalk?
We could certainly do that. We certainly consider doing that. Absolutely.
And I think we may need like a boxing ring style microphone to drop down in front of you. But apparently it's still difficult to hear you right now.
Okay. I got that. A little bit.
Yeah. Councilor Watson-Fellow.
Thank you, Chair. As I understand it from recent interactions with Janelle and a number of residents in the downtown area, there is some sort of data collected that I would like to learn a little bit more about that process to determine whether or not additional barrels are necessary in certain areas. Specifically, we had an instance where the residents of the Bricks and the business owners along that stretch of Church Street, and then on the other side of the Church Street lot as well, have witnessed a lot of litter, and unfortunately it looks like litter that people would like to put a place, but they're not taking it someplace. And so a lot of the time it's left on top of business owner barrels or private barrels that we know that, are our regular toters that get pulled out. And so a lot of the residents spend a lot of time cleaning up just picking up all that litter on their own. And so there was a bit of a back and forth with myself and some of the residents, business owners, Janelle and Ray, actually, to talk about, could we get another barrel there, like on the corner of Church and Washington, for example. like whether it may be one of the ones that's a recycle barrel combo or whatever, because it's such a high traffic area, and not just, I mean, for commuters, all year round, and for people who work downtown, but especially also obviously during tourism season. And Ray had said that there wasn't data to support adding one there, and so the first thing I advised the residents to do, obviously, was to stop picking up all the trash and let it sit there. So if whatever the assessment, the data collection process is, you would see, right, like exactly what the need would be. So can you talk a little bit more about what that data collection process is, how need and locations are determined, and if someone had a request for an additional barrel, or we felt a need for an additional barrel, where, how and when that gets determined, how it gets built into the budget, what it costs you, because I know it obviously it costs time and money to send the staff out to pick it up. And then the second question I had, going back to the first, the listing you gave us, which I felt was really helpful, those 52 barrels in the B5, does that include the ones that also are recycle barrels, or could you give us a recycle barrel number that is separate from that 52?
I'd have to give you that separately.
All right, great,
Yeah,
thanks.
I can do that. It may be a case, I know there was some issues and there was some conversations about the bricks area. It may be a case where we try to put some additional barrels out and see how that does. I know there's a lot of foot traffic during the month of October in that area from people coming to and from the train, and there's just not a lot of options for them to put those in. So I think they were using some of the bins that were out in that small alleyway. There may be an opportunity to do another pilot in that area to just try it and see, leave them out there for a month to see what kind of volume we get and see what kind of results we get. We can certainly do that.
So just to follow up, so
Yeah.
could you speak to what the process is for determining where a barrel might go? Like what that data, who is Janelle walking around, making observations, taking photographs, taking notes? Is she mapping around problem areas in the city? Like what does that data collection process look like?
It is a lot of that, and it's a lot of complaints that we get, and where the foot traffic is, and kind of pulling that all together. It's not as scientific as I think I would like it to be. We know how much material we're taking to the refuse processing facility in Lynn on a daily basis, because it gets weighed when we get there, so we know how much is coming, and we can kind of tie it to, not closely but loosely, to the areas that they're picking up. But it's kind of a combination of a number of different factors. We certainly rely on Janelle and her thoughts when she's out there, and then input from you and residents as well.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. A follow-on there, Dave. Just in the past, before I was a counselor, when I was a resident, I had requested through a ward counselor many years ago, many, like 3 or 4 counselors ago, to have those trash and recycling combo, sort of what they come side by side is usually how the setup is on Pedestrian Mall downtown, out in the park areas as well. As you know, out in the Collins Cove Park, and I'm sure every other park that has a playground, there's a lot of, water bottles specifically, a lot of like plastic refuse, and I was told at the time that there's not money in the budget for those specific kinds of barrels, and so you see the kind of, and I hate to put it this way, but sort of the quality of barrel and recycling options go down the further outside the downtown you get. And I would be curious to learn more about what the cost is to the city, what kind of investment you need from our buy-in to increase the number of recycling options outside of the downtown area, specifically in our park and rec areas.
Okay, I can certainly get that together for you. I don't know the costs off the top of my head. I know they're expensive.
Yeah.
But, and over time, they do break down, and there's a replacement cost that comes in just to keep them looking nice for in the areas where they are. But I can certainly put that together for you.
Great, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll jump over to public comment real quick, and I'll come back to, I think the two of you both have questions as well. So if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand if you're out in the audience. It's just Jeff Millar out there. Jeff, you've got a whole half hour to yourself if you want it. Okay, you can unmute yourself and state your name and name and address for the record.
Sure. Jeff Millar, and I live at 29 Boardman Street. I think you all know that I've written to all of you about this in the past, I still think that as we talk about passing tenant protection ordinances and stuff like that, and talk about how the rent is too darn high, and speaking from experience, it is, I think the fact that we charge tenants, and I'm not going to say landlords, because it's the tenants who pay the taxes and the fees on the places that they live, the fact that we charge tenants a fee for trash pickup, but we do not charge homeowners a fee, is incredibly inequitable. And, you know, attending one of the tenant protection meetings recently, we talked about how much more at risk tenants are than homeowners. There's a lot less cost certainty. I think there's been a lot more cost inflation. And so that particular item just seems like something that I think the city council should fix, you know, in this upcoming budget season. One other thing I'd like to note, I saw in your regular meeting agenda tomorrow, there's a proposal to add a bulk item pickup $20 fee that the resident, and I think the way this reads, would apply to homeowners and tenants, would pay a $20 fee to Waste Management for bulk item pickups, and that has not been a fee that's been charged since Waste Management's been here. They've been responsible for those bulk item pickups. So I hope that we're considering whether or not we're getting anything in return from Waste Management for allowing them to then bill those things to us. Maybe they bill them to the city and I just don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Dave, are you able to speak at all on the bulk item pickups that, you know, you and I talked about that briefly?
Yeah, so it is true, Jeff is correct. We have not charged for bulk item pickup since the waste management contract started, and I think it was actually before that with Northside Carting. But that is a cost that the city takes care of. So whatever bulk items that Waste Management picks up, we pay the cost for that. So they bill us on that for every item. And so, you know, we are rolling out a new mattress recycling program, and there will be a fee associated with that, the same $20 fee that we're going to charge to the bulk items. And we think that's just a kind of a more equitable way to share the cost of these items and try and reduce the amount of items being brought in from outside the city for free. You know, we're one of the more unique communities that doesn't charge for bulk items, and you know there are different fees for the mattress recycling that are coming out as the program is rolling out. But I think the thought was that let's make it across the board, try and limit the amount of materials coming into the city and just being disposed of at the city at the city cost, which gets shared by everybody. You know, it's part of the tax rate that funds the waste management contract. And if we have the users use it, you know, pay the fee, then there's a little bit more responsibility for making sure that you get stuff out and not bringing excess material out and sharing those costs that way. So households that don't have a lot of bulk item waste wouldn't get that fee, but other households that do would have to pay. So that's kind of the thinking behind that.
Thank you. I'll note that Councilor Carty has joined us remotely. Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. If you don't mind, Mr. Knowlton, I'm going to answer some of the things that came up. We used to, when I was the recycling coordinator, we used to have recycling bins on the common and some of the parks. And there was a time when we had a contract with Northside Carting that we didn't pay for the recycling pickup. And that's why we allowed businesses and all sorts of people to do recycling. But the contract is determined by the hauler. And so we went from dual stream, where we separated paper and we made money on paper, and, you know, didn't pay, we only paid for the tonnage of trash. But with, you know, the bids going out, we only had a couple of bids. Waste Management determined the kind of recycling and, you know, how it was charged. However, the reason that the recycling bins were pulled out of the parks and the common were because so much dog poop was put in the bins. And as everyone here knows, and the public, I'm sure, that the more contaminated the recycling, the more expensive it is for the city. And, you know, one load can be a truckload of recycling. It's significant how much can be contaminated just by a little bit of stuff. The other thing that I want to suggest on parks, and I talked to Ray Joden about this, and we've talked about this when I work for you, is that, you know, there's a concept where people have no trash receptacles at the park. They bring their stuff in, they take it out. I believe Beverly does that. And I don't know the studies exactly, but I think there's some out there that suggest that when people are required to, you know, not leave their trash at the park, that it results in a cleaner park. So I'm not saying that I know enough information about that, but it may be something that we could look into. And going back to like the point issue about litter, I don't think it's just containers and dumpsters and barrels overflowing. I've been, I think, at every Keep Salem Beautiful pickup in the Point, Riley Plaza, and other places. And yeah, there's some of that with the wind blow stuff around. But I think this really goes back to outreach where, you know, people, maybe not even people who live in these neighborhoods, and it's throughout the city, just feel the people who are not sensitive to the area and how clean it should be are, you know, just as they do with cigarette butts and not picking up the dog, you know, stuff, is that they are, they feel that the park or the sidewalk or the curb is a place that they can dump whatever they have. And I've seen people, when I was walking the neighborhoods, it's unbelievable. If that's your job and you're focused on people, you know, playing by the rules, you'd be surprised at how many times you see someone just throw something out of their car, or they're walking by and they just drop their container that has liquid in it or whatever. And that results, unfortunately, like at Mary Jane Lee Park, there's, you know, it's a health hazard, because you have kids walking around, there's broken glass and stuff like that, and a lot of the Salem pickup is broken glass, cigarette butts, and other things that are really a health hazard. So I just feel like it would be great to have more recycling bins out there, but we have to know why they were removed, and I think we could just, as a city, we could do a better job so that we can put some of those things back in place. And maybe, you know, I really do feel like this is trying to change the way people think about what they do with their waste.
Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I had the opportunity to go to the North Billerica MRF with the Recycling Committee and Janelle Rolk last month to basically be a part of the yearly audit. And it seemed like the biggest issue with contamination was, you know, refuse from a lot of the public bins that are recycling bins. And I don't know, after talking to Ms. Rolk, it seemed like it could be a good idea to possibly remove a couple of those, because it's just, contamination is contamination. I mean, if you have a little bit, it contaminates the whole batch. Moreover, about the bulk items, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's in the tens of thousands per month the city is responsible for paying. I think the intention with the state's ordinance about recycling, or at least you know, putting pressure on municipalities to recycle these things, is a lot of these bulk item pickups could be reused, and I think that's the point. But most other communities, their residents are responsible for paying those bulk items. I really think this is a benefit to our city, not only because we spend tens of thousands of dollars per month in bulk items that possibly could be reused, but moreover, you know, I think it should get people to think a little differently about maybe what is recyclable or what is reusable. Thank you.
Councilor McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to ask a slightly different question, sort of tangential to the things you said that you were going to talk to us about first, but I want to make sure that you kind of like got to the end of your prepared information before I go off into left field.
The only thing I had left was to talk about the street sweeping schedule.
Okay.
And I can.
I'm going to dive in then.
Okay.
So, I want to ask you specifically about pests, rodents in particular. And I know this is something that came up when we were discussing our recent wildlife ordinance. Excuse me again. But I do want to ask about it from the perspective of the interaction with trash and waste. The constituents I represent tend to be more on the neighborhood style and less on the commercial style, except for that business stretch down Highland. And but we still deal with a fair amount of litter and trash. We still do have housing developments that have commercial-sized dumpsters. And to some of the earlier comments, we deal with a lot of behavioral issues, whether it's toters overflowing because they're overfilled on trash day, or whether it's, there's that one car on the block that 5 19-year-olds pull up every night at 2 a.m. and dump all their trash out of the car. So what I hear from a lot about residents, though, is the presence of rats in our neighborhoods. And I know, or I suspect strongly, that there is an interaction with the amount of litter that comes from that. I've also started to observe that as we've had some of the heavy rains and the bigger storms that we get coming through, sometimes you get this surge effect where you get a flash flood and then all the rats kind of move up into the uplands, which tends to be my neighborhood. And then if there's good eating, they hang out for a while. And it gets pretty unpleasant. I mean, it does get to the point where there's like rats on your poles, rats on the wires, and people are upset about it. And that's what I mostly hear about. It's less about the presence of the bins and more about what are we going to do about all of these pests that are running around my yard and my street. So I do want to ask you if you have collected any data around the interaction between the presence of pests and the presence of sort of larger dumpsters, the presence of commercial businesses, known litter areas, and also if you have had any success sort of collaborating with the Board of Health, what kind of devices you put out, how you target where you put out your trapping mechanisms, your rat killing mechanisms, and kind of where that's going, because from what I'm collecting from my residents, there's a growing issue with pests and rodents, and I know some communities nearby like Peabody and whatnot have started to invest in some newer technology that helps them to sort of track and understand what's going on with the rodent population.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of data associated with the bins and the dumpsters. That is something that the Board of Health may have. They do take the lead on rodent control, whether it's in the city streets or in neighborhoods. On the engineering side, when we do capital improvement projects or we do road opening permits for anybody that's digging in the street, whether it's National Grid or Comcast or even our work, we require anything longer than 100 feet, a trench longer than 100 feet has to have a rodent control plan attached to it, which means they have to contract with a rodent control firm to go out and do pre-baiting, understand what kind of rodent activity is there, and then they have to monitor it as they go through the project to make sure that it doesn't become an issue. And if it does, if there's an uptick in the rodents that they see, more rodent control is added. And it's typically baiting that's used. It's the baiting that's been used for a number of years. There are newer technologies out there that you mentioned, and that's something that we can look at and require of our contractors, and certainly I'm sure the Board of Health is looking at that too, and that may be something that when if it's a neighborhood area, a neighborhood issue, they will go out and they will have the area baited, and they'll monitor it themselves. They could certainly look at different types of technology to do that.
Okay, so from your point of view, just so I can understand clearly, from your point of view, the Board of Health kind of takes the lead on the rodent control portion of things. You don't have any sort of existing initiative or partnership with them in terms of linking that information to the presence or lack thereof of refuse or trash or litter or dumpsters or anything like that?
We don't currently, but that's something that we could talk with them about to see if there's that relationship, that if we can correlate those, we could certainly try to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I think just to build off what Councilor McLean was just saying, I think there is a correlation, right, probably, between overflowing trash bins, litter on the street, depending on what kind of refuse it is, obviously, and increased rodent populations. I think we've seen it. You know, I grew up in Salem. We're a wharf town. We've always been a wharf town. Rats are here. They've been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. I think how we handle them is an excellent question. And actually, I'd be curious if, and this is probably more to the chair, if in future conversations around trash pickup and maintenance, if we included the Board of Health in the conversation, I wonder if they have direct recommendations to how many, you know, to the barrel question, or what kind of barrel, you know, covers or otherwise, and where and locations, and I absolutely would encourage more of a correlation conversation happening between the two, between your department and Dave Greenbaum's.
Sure.
That would be great.
Sure.
Thanks.
Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Hepworth. I also am intrigued and would like to pursue this question a little bit more. I guess my question to you is, Mr. Knowlton, concerning pest control programs, is there any program implemented in-house, or is it all done from contractors?
All contractors. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I think that just to answer some of those questions, this, depending on the will of the body, this could remain in committee, and I know there's more work to be done on this, and potentially changes to ordinances and more conversations to have. So if it's the will, we could leave this in committee and bring this back. Any other questions for Dave or comments? Councilor Prosnewski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. David, commercial properties that have their own dumpsters, do they pay any extra trash fee to the city, or do they pay no trash for the city? How is that?
If they have their own pickup,
Yes.
they pay it themselves. Yeah, there's no fee from the
Okay.
city.
So if a commercial property, let's just use Pickering Wharf for an example, that does not have any trash barrels on their streets, they have their own dumpsters, but they don't have any trash barrels. A lot of trash, I'm sure, is generated over there, but it doesn't go into their dumpsters. It winds up in city barrels and in neighborhood barrels and things like that. Isn't there some kind of a responsibility for that private entity to be assessed a fee because they're generating the trash that we're picking up and paying for?
I think that might be something that the council and the administration may want to consider moving forward if you're going to make changes to the trash ordinance. That may be something to look at, but I'm not aware of anything that's on the books now to deal with that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Councilor Varela.
If there's no more questions, I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. Yeah, I'm sorry. So, we did want to talk about street sweeping real quickly, or as much time as you'd like to use
Okay.
to talk through just some of the...
This hopefully won't take too long.
Sure.
But, I did want to share how the street sweeping is scheduled and then rolled out. It's much like the trash collection calendar that we do on an annual basis. We scope out the schedule early kind of late in the winter, early in the spring, and we set up the calendar for certain sweeps in certain areas, and we try to avoid trash pickup days. We try to minimize disruptions from holidays and things. But basically, once the snow stops and we have a chance to clear the roads, we get right back into street sweeping. And the first things that we do is it's a entrance corridor sweep and then a neighborhood sweep. We do that early in the spring. And the entrance corridor sweep entails an early morning, 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. effort to blow the sidewalks and any refuses on the sidewalks into the street, and then we have street sweepers that come through, and we sweep all those things up. And that takes about 2 weeks to do. Once that's done, we go into the neighborhood, and we start methodically hitting every neighborhood in the city. That takes about a month to do, and that typically takes all day. And it just, for labor force issues, we don't blow all the sidewalks when we do those neighborhoods. We just sweep in the streets. But again, it takes about a month to do that. And once that's done, then the summer season kind of kicks in. And when we do that, we focus on the Point area and the downtown area. In the Point area, we sweep twice a month, typically early the first Monday and the third Monday of the month. And that's a full day of sweeping. And we do blow the sidewalks and then sweep. And then every month during the summer and into the fall, we also do, in the middle of the month, we do a downtown sweep. Excuse me. And that's typically from 9 or 10 o'clock at night till about 1 or 2 in the morning. And that's, again, a blowing and then sweeping effort. And then we get to the fall. Typically, this year we did it in September. We did the entrance corridors again, which was the blow and then the sweep. And then we did we're currently doing the neighborhood sweeps. And this year we've done it a little bit later in the year, purposefully to try and get as much leaves up as we can, because, we were doing it in September and October and early October, and that we really wasn't getting the leaves after the leaves were still on the trees. Now most of the leaves have fallen, and there's a lot of leaves out there. It's taking us a lot longer. We're seeing a lot more volume, but we think this is a good thing to try and get up as many leaves as possible. We are definitely seeing an uptick in the material. We're using 2 sweepers because there's so much material out there, so we have sweepers in tandem to pick everything up. And I think, once we get through this fall sweeping, I think we can kind of step back and see if it really makes sense to do it again this way. But that's kind of the way we do the sweeping. It's entrance corridors and neighborhoods in the start, then it's all through the summer, point twice, downtown once a month, and then end up again to clean up in the fall in those entrance corridors and the neighborhoods.
Thank you. And I like seeing the later sweeping, especially in the point. I think that what we've noticed in the past is the leaves fall down. Then there's some big November storm typically, and we get a lot of clogged drains. You mentioned getting out and blowing also. Do they specifically focus on some of those drains? Or are they to unclog them, or is that part of the duties?
It's, when they're blowing, they blow everything, whether it's leaves or litter. They get it all off the sidewalk, get it out into the street, and then sweep it up. And the sweepers will continue to pick up until the street is clean. Other times when there's leaf litter out there, it's definitely an issue where catch basins get covered and ponding starts, and we end up responding. Even yesterday, this morning when we had the heavy rains, there was some puddling in the downtown area and all around the city. So we have to go out and do that. That's not going to go away. We're not going to pick up all the leaves. There's still a lot of leaves that fall on private property, but we want to try and do the best we can to get the bulk of the leaves out of the right-of-way that we own. So that's the effort there.
Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth, to Mr. Knowlton. I am a big fan of the delayed or the later street sweeping. And one reason is that the wet leaves, as you get deeper into the fall, make the sidewalks and the streets more treacherous, dangerous for pedestrians and other people. But I want to pick up on something that Councilor Hapworth said. If you could really address the difficulties when the catch basins and the storm drains aren't clear, how that affects the trucks that are trying to clean up.
It adds to the amount of material that we bring up, and the street sweepers that we have are not really designed to pick up leaves. They're more for litter, but we can do it if we do continuous routes, and we do two sweepers in tandem, so we have one follow another as we go through in and out of the areas. The ponding of catch basins that are covered with leaves is a kind of a constant issue. We hope, and I think we have it in a number of different places and sometimes we'll send a code red out if we know there's a big storm coming, just to remind people to clear the basins that are near your house to make sure that they are functioning. And it's not a good idea to just move them out of the way on the street because it's going to rain and the water's going to wash them back onto the basins. It's better to get them up onto the sidewalk or off the back of the sidewalk so they don't become an issue in the future. But it's a constant reminder of trying to keep that maintenance up. And then, we rely on the residents and the businesses to help us with that.
Councilor Watson-Feld.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Mr. Knowlton, can you talk about the special equipment that DPW may have to clear in our new safety bike lane areas and on our pedestrian pathways and things, and how you clear those of leaves and refuse as well, please?
Yep.
And what the schedule is. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, so we will use in areas where we have flex posts, we have what's called a MadVac, which is a smaller piece of equipment that has sweeping capabilities on it. It's a small machine that can get into smaller areas. Doesn't have the volume of our big sweepers, so we're continuously emptying it. But we use that, and we'll continue to use that. We're in the process of buying another piece of equipment to help us on North Street with the change that's out there. And the equipment that we try to buy is multi-purposed. It's not only for sweeping to get litter and clear leaves, but it's also to be used in the wintertime to keep those things clear. We've got a lot of bike lanes, a lot of shared use paths all around the city, so we've been gradually over time increasing our capacity with the equipment that we buy to be able to respond to that and keep those open and usable all season long, all winter long.
Just to follow on, I know we're not talking about snow tonight, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. I think that folks who use, it could be argued that folks who use the shared use paths are maybe a little bit more vulnerable to, like Councilor Cohen was saying before, potential injury, falling, slipping, not being able to pass easily. So I am curious as we look forward both to, especially on North Street now with the leaves that are there, which I've seen online is like really a lot of them, but also snow and the shared paths moving forward. I know it's difficult to balance plowing our streets and clearing our paths when schools are open and stuff like that, but I would encourage maybe future conversations around the prioritization of how we get things cleared and when, and if there's separate staff to do that versus, because I know it's difficult to prioritize when the snow is just dumping down. But I do think, to Councilor Cohen's point, I think people, people are trying to walk to work or walk to the train station are definitely more, at risk, I think, when they're out in the middle of the winter.
Yeah, we have changed our winter operations as well. Previously to me starting and maybe for the first couple of years, there was the focus was primarily on the streets, get the streets cleared, and then afterwards we would start thinking about sidewalks and paths. It's just, we can't do that anymore. So we have people, contractors, our own staff and equipment out all during the storms to keep up with the storm, keep up with the snow and make sure it's passable for people going to the train, coming downtown, coming to restaurants, things like that. So we have changed and it seems to be working, but we're going to see more and more paths. We're going to see more and more bike paths, and so we have to keep up with that and make sure we can keep them clean, sweeping, and deal with snow in the wintertime and ice as well.
Great, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth. I'd like to make, first before I make a motion, I think, I believe this should stay in committee, but I think out of our conversation tonight, I think that the health department should be brought into this, into the fold of this conversation. I think there's a direct correlation with problem areas with rodents, and I think that the trash and the rodent and pest control go hand in hand. So I think this is a much bigger conversation. So I would advise the chair if we could possibly recommend Mr. Greenbaum come to entertain us on what they're doing about pest control. With that, I'd like to make a motion for this to remain in committee.
Councilor Varela makes a motion to leave this in committee. Seconded by Councilor McLean. All in favor? All opposed? So that's 5 councilors, including myself, voting yes. Do we have another motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Councilor McLean. All in favor? All opposed? And we're adjourned. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Good to see everybody.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.
It's Mr. Knowlton.